If you're intrigued by Shakespeare's early comedies and some courtly antics, or a mix of witty wordplay with themes of romance and reason, then today's book just might be for you. Today I'm covering Love's Labour's Lost by William Shakespeare. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we are taking a look and an act-by-act summary of one of Shakespeare's earlier comedies, and one of his more interesting comedies in terms of fitting in or deciding where exactly it fits in. There's a fair amount of criticism about some elements of it, although it certainly still has a lot of things going for it as well. I wouldn't put this on the high end of well-known plays, but it's also not his least known play either. Love's Labour's Lost was one of Shakespeare's early comedies and is believed to be written in the mid 1590s. There's actually a possibility that it was performed before Queen Elizabeth I. Maybe even that was influenced the writing of it. I'm not totally sure. The play centers on the King of Navarre and three of his companions who vowed to avoid women and dedicate themselves to study and fasting for 3 years. But as fate would have it, they all fall for the Princess of France and her attendants, and they end up, well, you'll find out what happens with their vows. But of course, that is just a part of it. Just like anything with Shakespeare, there's going to be all sorts of stuff that just makes this a fascinating little play, and some questions about the type of ending that is in there. So let's take a quick look. In Act 1, the play opens with Ferdinand, the King of Navarre, and his companions, Baron, Dumaine, and Longueville. I think that's how you say their names. I don't know. Taking a solemn oath to avoid women and dedicate themselves to 3 years of intense study. We also meet Don Adriano de Armado, a comical Spaniard who reports a budding romance between Custard, a rustic, and Jacanetta, or a country wench. In Act 2, the Princess of France arrives with her ladies, Rosalind, Maria, and Catherine, hoping to discuss a land dispute with the king. Due to the decree, they must camp outside the court despite his vow. The king quickly falls for the princess, as do his lords with other ladies. In Act 3, the comic mishaps escalate as the men secretly express their newfound romantic feelings. Baron pens a love letter to Rosalind, which gets mixed up with Don Armado's letter to Jacanetta. His mistake causes all kinds of misunderstandings. In Act 4, a humorous twist, each man discovers the other's broken vows. They decide to renounce their oaths and, of course, to pursue the women openly. They plan a masquerade to charm the ladies who, having overheard this scheme, disguise themselves to confuse the men even further. In Act 5, the lords' disguises are revealed, and the men apologize for their antics. Just as the courtship seems to be heading towards marriage, a messenger interrupts with news of the princess's father's death. The ladies declare a year of mourning, asking the men to wait a year before resuming their pursuit. Don Armado pledges his own fidelity to Jacanetta, and the play ends with a song about the changing seasons, leaving the love stories unresolved. That unresolved element is one of the things that makes this a rather distinct comedy slash romance for Shakespeare. And there seems to be a lot going on with that parallelism between them taking their own vows, and then of course the women that they had pursued ending up taking vows of their own, and making this kind of a bit of a challenge for the people that you're supposed to be invested in. And that's one of the things that makes this one of the more curious plays that Shakespeare wrote, at least in this category in particular. I would say for that reason, I do think there's still all the things in a Shakespeare play that you're going to enjoy. There's certainly the play on words. It's got all the mixed up antics. There's a fair amount of false identities or misidentification. There's going to be all these things that make his plays all the more engaging and humorous. But that unresolved ending seems to make this play a little different in a curious way, because the question is, why exactly would you have this unresolved ending, or why would you not feel the need to actually have some kind of completed romance, or all of his, or most of his comedies tend to end, of course, with a great moment of celebration, and that's missing here. And so the question is this more of one of his problem plays where the tone's just not totally sure, even though, to be fair, all throughout it's humorous. It's not like some of his other problem plays where the tone is mismatched. It's just a matter of he chose to not have quite the same ending that he has with all his others. Does the fact that it was performed for the Queen affect that? Is there some reason? Of course, Queen Elizabeth I was the Virgin Queen. Does that have something to do with why he would choose to have the women continue to take their vows? I really don't know, but I do know that it is something you should be aware of if you're going to read this play and you are expecting to be like all his others. So who is this for? Well, it's a comedy and it's not very long. So in those two regards, it is definitely going to be on the slightly easier end for people to get through, at least in terms of length. However, I feel like Shakespeare's comedies are also harder to understand when it comes to the humorous elements. You certainly have to really dig into some of the phrases and you really have to try to understand what is even going on to really appreciate the humorous elements of this play. If you're willing to do that, I think you can certainly enjoy this, especially if you have read enough of Shakespeare's other plays and you're looking for a decently known play, but again, not one that is so well known that you've probably already read it a couple times in high school. I've never heard of anyone performing this in high school or reading it in high school, so I do not know. So I don't believe this to be a super well known or at least a frequently performed play. That being said, it's certainly one that I recognize the name of. I probably couldn't have given you much details about the characters until I read it myself, and I certainly would say that the storyline seemed pretty fresh to me. So all of that is to say that this is definitely a Shakespeare play that the name could definitely be recognized by people. So if you're reading it for any kind of social or cultural appreciativeness, I think you're going to be in a relatively small group. Not to say it's not good, but I just think the amount of people that read it is probably going to be limited compared to many of his other plays. But if that is not going to bother you, or if that's the very thing you're looking for, then I think it's a pretty good play for you. I don't find it too problematic in most other respects. I think some of Shakespeare's other comedies in a modern sensibility might be a little harder for you to appreciate, such as The Taming of the Shrew. But I think in this case, you're not going to be quite as bothered by that. You certainly have bits of it, but it in this case seems to be much more of the humor. Of course, understanding 16th and early 17th century gender roles and expectations, it requires its own effort. So all of that aside, I still found this humorous, and I would recommend to people that are willing to take it with all those caveats. So who is this not for? Well, if you're still getting into Shakespeare, I would not recommend this for you, not because it's not a good play, but simply because it's not going to be super well known. And so you are not going to get a whole lot of social advantage from it in terms of being able to quote from it, even recognizing the storyline. I think all those things, or even the fact that it's not performed very often, if you wanted to go see a performance of it, you would probably be a little hard pressed in some of Shakespeare's better known plays. And I think all those things might make this not the play for you. But of course, I would love to know what you guys think about Love's Labour's Lost, especially about the unfinished ending of it, or where you think it stacks up in terms of recommending it for people that are just getting into Shakespeare plays, or if you think this is for someone that's already got a fair amount of familiarity, because it's going to take all the regular effort of trying to understand the dialogue in addition to getting to know the storyline when you probably are not already familiar with it. Please let me know in the comments, but don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.